Dear brothers and sisters, it was a little strange today to hear such a short gospel reading. Usually, they are longer than today's reading, and frequently we have more than one reading because we commemorate a saint or we're continuing to celebrate a particular feast day. Today's reading is short, and the reading itself on the surface seems to be simple. Basically, the purpose of life is to love. Christ says, "Do unto others as you would like them to do unto you." The golden rule. We probably even learned that in kindergarten. Certainly our parents have taught us that. Simply love. Even love your enemies. That's the very essence of our being, brothers and sisters. For we are created in the image and likeness of God, God who is love. And it's within us, it's our very being to love. So the more we love, the more human we become. The more godlike we become. The more we think about ourselves, the less godlike we are. And the more we resemble the devil. The devil who is pure selfishness and pride. But these just aren't simply sweet words, brothers and sisters. We all know that it's not easy to love. It's not easy to love those who are willing to stab us in the back, those who are willing to step over us as we climb through the ladder of life. It is not easy for us to be patient with those who cut us off on the road. It is not easy for us to be patient with people with whom we work, who completely don't understand us. It is not easy for us in our marriages to completely understand our spouse and to be willing to sacrifice everything. Why isn't it easy? Because we live in a sinful world, we have an inclination to think more about ourselves than we do others. And even when we think we love our children, love our spouse, love our neighbor, it is usually somewhat related to selfishness. For what do we receive in return? Christ says in another place, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's neighbor, one's brother. Christ in another place says, love your neighbor as yourself. St. Theophan the Recluse reminds us that all of us, that there isn't anyone who doesn't love themselves. There isn't anyone who would hesitate to do something for yourself. And that's our measure of how much we should love. Just as we are ready to do anything for ourselves, we should be ready even more so to be ready to do anything for our neighbor, our spouse, our child, our friends. This is rooted in compassion, St. Theophan the Recluse says. For when we truly have compassion, then any egoism just flees from the whole scenario. Compassion means to suffer with. We all know what kind of shortcomings we have. We could we sit down and write down all of our shortcomings real easily. We come to confession. We recite prayers at night and ask God to forgive us and recite all the things that we did that day. We know how difficult life is for me. But to have compassion is to understand likewise that the person next to us, our spouse, our children, our neighbor, our fellow parishioners, likewise, all have difficulties and shortcomings and weaknesses and passions. And they all have good days and they all have bad days. And frequently, when we have a bad day, we greet someone who likewise has a bad day. And we know what happens. It's not good. Especially when things are difficult, we don't think about the other person. We're more focused on how hard it is for me. Saint Theophylact of Bulgaria says, if you want your enemies, those who are always wishing you evil, if you want your enemies to continue in their evil attitude towards you, then likewise do the same. If you want them to love you, then being angry and resentful and hurtful won't help them to love you. The key here is change. We all need to change. We all need to love God more. We all need to love our neighbor more. We all need to think about ourselves less. So what affects in us change? When we read Holy Scripture, when we read about the lives of the saints, we are touched, we are moved. We think to ourselves, how did that person do this? How did that martyr endure so many sufferings? It moves us and causes us to pause and think and re-evaluate our life. When someone does something kind to us, out of the blue, unexpected, likewise, we are touched by that person's kindness. And so when we strive to love those around us, it is for the purpose of everyone changing and drawing even closer to God. And then when we do this, our relationships prosper. The more our relationships are focused on the other rather than the self, the more fruitful and fulfilling they are. The more we sacrifice to follow God's will, the more complete we are. The more we fall down in obedience to God's commandments, the freer we become. Think about that concept. The more we are obedient, the more we submit ourselves to God, the more we sacrifice our free will to God, the freer we become. Free from passion, free from anger, free from sin. But we have to submit to God's commandments. And in that same vein, the more we love selflessly, the more we will be loved in return. That's not the purpose. The purpose is the change in the relationship. So whether we are married for a couple of years or decades, whether our children are small or already adults and living independently, regardless of what kind of relationships we have, they always have room to be more vibrant. There is always more room for change. So let us, brothers and sisters, always keep compassion in mind when we interact with others, because we are all sinners. We all have shortcomings. And when we acknowledge our own shortcomings, then we are better prepared to see and understand that the person in front of us likewise has difficulties and needs patience, just as we need patience. After all, Christ died on the cross for us, not because we deserved it, but because he loved us. We were enemies, and he died on the cross so that we would be saved, so that we would change. Love changes us. Ask any newlywed couple who truly love each other. They see right in front of their eyes how that profoundly changes them. Ask any couple who've been married happily for decades, and they see how life has been so fulfilling. Love changes us for the good. That's why we are called to do this, so that we can be saved.